Okay, so I will take us on now to the next speaker. I can't wait to ask you some more stuff about that at the end. There's so much to think about there. So we will now hear Simran Dhingra, who is pursuing an MA in conflict analysis and peace building from Jamia Millia Islamia in India. She completed a BA in English literature and journalism at the University of Delhi. She's currently working as a communications intern at a United Nations Global Compact Network in India. Her main areas of interest are women's writing, post-colonial literature, realism, and eco-criticism. Very cool. So yeah, just take it away whenever you're ready.
Thank you so much, Alicia. And I'm really happy to be here. A very good afternoon, everyone. It must be morning in Ireland. So let me just share my screen, please. I hope you're able to see my screen. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so today I'm going to present my research paper on borders, memory, and trauma, narratives from the Forgotten India. The Forgotten India, the place that I'm referring to here is the Northeast India, which is a very which is a region which we don't consider as the mainland India, because the Northeast, it's a very multi-ethnic, multi-linguistic, and very multicultural environment, and the people there have they look different, they speak a different language and from the mainland India, and that's why they're often stereotyped as outsiders and they face a lot of discrimination. And to provide a brief background, the Northeastern Indian borderlines are cultural intersections linking South and Southeast Asia. And the region is an intricate mosaic of varied ethnicities, tribes, and languages. And the creation of borders marks a distinction between us and others. And the 1947 partition of the subcontinent is an attestation of the violence and atrocities that ensure post-border constructions. And the Northeastern people are stereotyped as outsiders or Bangladeshi immigrants, although they may have been living in India for generations, because they don't fit the narrative on the mainland India. And the recent Citizenship Amendment Act and National Register of Citizenship has only aggravated the issues, bringing forth the global concerns around migration and citizenship. Because usually when we talk about migration, it's very Eurocentric perspective, but there's also a lot happening in the South Asian region that needs to be discussed more. And I have taken basically a novel. It's called The Point of Return, and I am putting that in the context with what is happening today. The Point of Return is about the people who have migrated to India back in the 1960s, and it navigates the life of a family, how they make sense of the environment where they live, and while facing discrimination from the indigenous communities. And it talks about the trauma and the memory and resistance and the displacement, alienation that they have inherited. As you can see here, this is the map of Northeast India. What you see at the bottom here is the gray area is the map of India, and the whole green region is the map of the Northeast India. And these are several states in Northeast India. And as you can see over here, Assam is very strategically located, and it's bordering with different countries such as Bhutan, Bangladesh, and Myanmar as well. So to provide a historical background, after the partition of the subcontinent, the Muslim community in Assam faced a lot of brutal violence, and they were also forcibly displaced in the 1950. And the year is infamously called the Rioter Bosor, the year of the riot. And subsequently in 1951, the National Register of Citizens was first drafted to identify and deport illegal immigrants from East Pakistan, which is the present day Bangladesh. And the Assamese population over the years has been fed with a lot of anti-immigration politics and a lot of xenophobic and Islamophobic information. And they're afraid of losing their land, resources, identity, and culture to the migrants. So a lot of Hindus had fled from Bangladesh as well, and the Indian constitution had made a special provision for them and granted them citizenship till January 1st, 1966. So whoever came to India, fled to India for safety and protection, they were to be granted citizenship. And the refugees were required to go through a process of naturalization. However, most of them did not follow those legal procedures, and thus they reflect as illegal immigrants, migrants. And the Indra Mujib Treaty, or Indo Bangladeshi Treaty of Friendship, was signed in 1971 after the Bangladesh liberation. And according to this treaty, anybody, irrespective of religion, who entered Assam before March 1971 would not be a de facto immigrant. And there has always been an unprecedented violent agitations against Muslims, which are happening since the 1980s. And there's a lot of false propaganda going around that a large number of Muslim Bangladeshis had infiltrated Assam and everything. However, data says otherwise. And to talk about the identity, so as I mentioned, the novel that I have taken, the book The Point of Return by an Assamese author, Siddhartha Deb, it's a semi-autobiographical novel, and it also discusses it's set somewhere in Assam or Meghalaya. It's in the northeast state, and it navigates the life of Bengali Hindu family who are alienated, even though they have been living in a multicultural environment. So the protagonists are Dr. Dam. He's a veteran, and his son Babu. So the father and son have two opposing worldviews. The father believes in post-Nehruvian, since India gained independence. So there was an idea of a new India, and there was a lot of hope. And as the 70s and 80s came by, after 20, 30, 40 years after partition, that hopefulness that was there, all that motivation for a new India, those dreams started fading away. So that's the generation that Babu represents. And Dr. Dam is a hopeful person, and his family had come to India, fled to India from Bangladesh in the 1960s. And despite living in the region for 4 or 5 decades, they still do not have a permanent homeland, and they assume to be illegal because they originally came from another place and speak a different dialect. Although they speak the same language, Bengali, but it's a different dialect. And the story is narrated from a third person and confessional mode by Babu, who introspects and reflects upon the precarious and pathetic life that his father, Dr. Dam, has led, and tries to make sense of his own identity through all of it. And the act of remembering and necessity to recall trauma, the historic loss, has been interwoven in the character's attempt to negotiate to create a sense of belongingness and identity, while they are constantly being marginalized and are resisting the ethnic dominance by indigenous people. And repeated redrawing of borders because of ethnic groups' demands for autonomy has further deepened the socio-political unrest and amplified the distress between the government and the northeastern people. And insurgency and violence have come to define the region, making it a largely militarized zone and threatening the lives of ordinary citizens. And displaced communities. As we say in the novel, hostility and discrimination against the Bengali minority settlers is clearly discerned in the behavior of the common tribal people and the different people that they meet. They say things like Bengalis, no use for Bengalis, always coming over the border. And they're seen as people who stereotyped as people who don't do anything. And such discrimination and violence against the outsiders, it's really bad. And Dr. Dam and other displaced East Bengalis could not find a place with the large agglomeration that is India, and they're thrust from their adopted homeland, which they owe allegiance to, and by the tribals who wish to throw them out of their homeland and expel them, so that they do not contaminate their isolationist purity. And alienation. So the people in the novel feel very powerless, and they have fear for their lives, and their alienation haunts them. And there's a thwarted sense of belongingness. They do not have a sense of home, and they have questions of their identity and existence. And it gets to a point, the whole discrimination that they face, that it stopped mattering whether it was India, Bangladesh, or Pakistan where they were living, because they were treated the same way everywhere. They were not they were outsiders everywhere they went. And it portrays the brutality of the tribal groups toward the non-tribal groups. And in the novel, many people are slaughtered by indigenous population, and no one can protest against them. And even because the police in the novel, it is not helping the people. And the Dr. Dam has to face racial discrimination in his office as well, in the veterinarian department where he works, and despite serving the country and state as his whole life. And on the contrary, even the minister threatens him that corpse of one more foreigner will not make any difference, quote unquote. That's taken from the novel. So uh, there's also an incident in the novel, particularly when Babu and his father, unaware of the curfew, went out and they were beaten by the vigilance in the market. And police didn't take any action; they were just standing there like spectators. And this led to both of them feeling traumatized and horrified, as if their lives didn't matter. So memory and trauma. And Siddhartha Deb, the author, presents a thrice partitioned Bengal together with the partition of Assam, giving rise to the most peculiar kind of cartographic isolation and the othered space of memory. Partition was experienced as a wound to the mind of those who experienced it, and also the ones who escaped it. So that trauma doesn't leave them even after they have left the place. And violence, rape, and destruction of entire ways of lives are there. And there is the living truth that are binding these nations together. And remembrance as resistance. So the novel is located in the time frame of 1947 and 1971, and it endeavors to trace the dialectic of the memory and forgetting. It is a narrative that seeks to retrace the fragile webs of kinship and memory, in which individuals remain suspended long after the political and personal events have sent them in different directions. And coming to the recent times, these are images from the protest. The National Register of Citizens and Citizenship Amendment Act that I had mentioned previously. So it has faced a lot of backlash and support as well, because the opinions are very divided in the country, because there are people who have the xenophobia and Islamophobia, and they're very afraid of these alleged outsiders who are here to take their resources, and who are actually at the end of the day just normal citizens like everybody else and living precarious lives. So these are some of the pictures from the various protests. And the NRC has actually become a tool for persecuting marginalized Muslims and Bengali Hindus through its provisions that are both activists and human rights activists and scholars have termed it as very exclusionary and discriminatory. And the reason for that is because the NRC is only granting citizenship to it has provisions to grant citizenship to only Hindus, Christians, and people, Sikhs, Buddhists, and people of other religions from neighboring countries such as Pakistan, Afghanistan, or Bangladesh. So, if there's any Muslim refugees coming in, then they do not have the right to claim asylum and citizenship. And it's very exclusionary because it excludes the Muslims and only give citizenships to Hindus, certain people from certain religions, Hindus, Christians, and Buddhists. And Assam's whole entire population had applied for inclusion in the National Register of Citizenships. So when this whole list was being made, the whole population had applied, and only 12 million indigenous inhabitants were given the original inhabitant status, and about 1.9 million people were rendered destitute as their names didn't make it to the final NRC list. And there has been a sharp increase in the number of suicides in the region from 2015 to 2019. And that's because the people have this fear that they'll be ousted from this home, that they'll have nothing. Uh, and their whole families will have to leave. So all this, it's that fear that's driving them to do this. And these are very poor people, and who are being uh, who are being troubled this way. And currently there are over 3,000 people in 6 detention centers in Assam. So those whose names don't come in the list, they are sent to the detention centers. And a number of families are unable to produce documents supporting their residence because they ask for a whole set of documents. And the region of Assam, it's very prone to natural calamities and disasters. It's prone to earthquakes and floods, and every year there's all these natural disasters happening, and a huge number of people are displaced. So, and these are very poor, some of them are very poor uneducated people. So poor record keeping has led to the a problem that people do not have the proper documents even if they have been living here. And because of the earthquakes and floods and displacement, the people actually lose their whole entire homes. Where are they supposed to store the documents? How are they supposed to keep them intact? And these are the reasons: poor record keeping, illiteracy, poverty. And they, even once the name is in the list, they're even unable to file a legal claim because they're illiterate and poor people. They can't afford to hire lawyers or fight the case, and the burden of proving citizenship rests on them uh, uh, entirely. They have to prove that they're citizens, they have to provide documents. And though the novel that I have mentioned, The Point of Return, it only revolves around few characters. It revolves around one Hindu Bengali family and a few other characters. It tells the stories of millions around the world who are outsiders, the others. And Deb has attempted to prove a case for these displaced families and symbolically critique how the society treats these non-citizens and displaced individuals. Because in the novel, although Dr. Dam is a veterinarian and he's an educated person, still he's treated so badly and horribly. So it brings me to the question, like, just imagine how the poor laborers and farmers and the poorer people in Assam are treated when an educated person, a privileged person, is being treated this way. So what happens to these people? That's the question that I would like to part with. And tracing Dr. Dam's, it's a very hypothetical case that I have got there. So tracing Dr. Dam's journey to citizenship. If this person we read about in the novel, it was real, so what would have happened? So since Dr. Dam's family are Bengali Hindus, so this chart, as you can see here, it provides what happens in All India NRC. So the people have to produce full set of documents to prove their citizenship and to prove they're legal citizens or a legal person. And the Citizenship Amendment Act makes them show a proof of religion. So if they're Hindu, Sikh, Jain, Buddhist, Christian, or Parsis, and where they're originally from, if they're from Pakistan, Afghanistan, Bangladesh, or elsewhere, then they do have a right to claim citizenship. But again, that takes a number of years. It's not an easy process. And in that whole process, in all those years, what are they supposed to do? Because they do not have any privileges that the citizen in a country enjoys. And whereas on the other hand, if you're a Muslim, then there's literally no chance for you. You're deemed an illegal person. You have no right to vote. You may be sent to detention center. You may be deported. So this is the fate of the people are facing here. um, so this is what I wanted to share. And thank you. And one really nice quote from the book: memories are the only assets which can never fall prey to the bureaucratic agendas. So whatever the politics are being played, memories and human feelings, human connectedness is the only thing which can never fall prey to these political and discriminatory agendas. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Simran. That was a really informative presentation and such a lovely ending quote as well.